Well, and believe me, I do a relatively same amount of thing for a living, so I do know the kind of effort that you have to put in. So again, I appreciate it.
You said doo-doo.
Yeah, there was a comment in there.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan, and welcome to another edition of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, my name is Peter, and today it is the normal trio, duo along, I always get that wrong, but it's the normal trio, I'm of which one, the other two would be Dan Crook. Hello, Dan, are you reveling in the fact that yet another English team has made it to the semifinals of a World Cup? That's amazing.
Yes, I'm overjoyed. Yeah, I didn't get to see the game today, but it seemed like a great performance. Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder. I was going to say I'm calling in from the pit of despair, where there is only a note that says Michael Barrios subbed off for Santiago Mosquera in the 76th minute.
Oh, we'll talk about that in plenty due time, my friend. And there he is, your hero and mine, founder and co-editor of thirddegree.net and the Dallas Morning News. Buzz Carrick, come in, Buzz.
Hello, gentlemen. Calling in from Houston, Texas, where I'm working the Gold Cup on Saturday.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Are you really in Houston?
I'm not really in Houston, but I will really be in Houston tomorrow because I'm working the TV for the Gold Cup.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I know that there's actually
we have jobs.
Yeah, I guess everybody does have a job. So here's the deal. There have been two games, and they were really totally the polar opposite. But I think the one that everybody wants to talk about is the really deflating loss, the 2-2 loss, as I like to refer to it. FC Dallas 2, Vancouver Whitecaps 2. Here's the deal. I elected to stay home and watch the U.S. game last night, and I was, probably 75 minutes into the FC Dallas game. I took a peek on Twitter and saw that Dallas was up 2-0, and then several hours later noted, oh my God, they ended up losing that game 2-2. What in the hell happened, guys?
Well, that's a good question. What happened was a lot of things. The kids, if you will, the younger players did not do a particularly good job of killing the game off. But I will say that Luchi Gonzalez contributed to the problem, as we've many times talked about on this podcast. Young coach, he's learning on the job in a certain extent, and he made some substitution mistakes in my book, and it cost Dallas the win. There's lots of little bit of things you can talk about, lots of little mistakes, and when you include the coach, it all compiled, and it did not go well. But we should say that the Toronto game was fantastic, and the first 80 minutes of the game against Vancouver was fantastic. It was only the last 15 minutes that were a nightmare, and it was about as bad a meltdown as you'll ever see.
Speaking of which, I've never seen Lucci quite so angry in a press conference. He walks in, nobody says a word, and he just, he always gives us long answers and long thoughts, but talking about the disappointment, he finished, I'm going to ask the question, I asked the question, and then kind of like, just of his own accord, just goes sort of back into expressing his disappointment with the game and failing to pick things up late on. It was interesting. It was there was definitely a lot of open self-reflection there.
Did you get a sense that he was mad at himself? He was mad at his players? When you say he was the first time you'd ever seen him angry like that, I haven't never seen him like that, so I'm kind of how was that reflected in what he said?
In both himself and the players. And the players and the 2-2s there, but with the chances they had, it should have been 4. When they were trying to kill the game off kill the game off late on, and went to a walking pace, they couldn't pick it back up. In the taking Barrios off at the wrong time, just a lot of frustration all around. It was very much a shared blame.
Again, I haven't seen the game. I've only seen the highlights, and I've read a ton of comments. And if there's one kind of consistent comment that is made, and maybe it's because he ends up flopping onto the ground, apparently not really injured, and he gets in the way and is a part of the problem that results in the second goal. Everybody seems to have their knives out for Baji, and getting back to my point was the kind of consistent common complaint was Lucci's bizarre thing about pulling Barrios off early and leaving Baji on for extended periods of time. What do we have any idea what that's about, or is there something to that Lucci's right to do?
Well, my assumption is that he's looking to reduce the load on his best attacking player, or include Paxton too, his best two attacking players during this time of heavy loads. He wants to not have them go 90 minutes every game. And the criticism of, which I think is not necessarily a bad example, the reason I'm critical of that particular sub is not that he took Barrios off, it's that he didn't replace him with a player that had a vertical component. When you brought on Mosquera, who's not a vertical player, Vancouver was no longer forced to sit back. They were no longer forced to defend the counters with as much focus, and they didn't have to build from as deep anymore. It allowed them to play high and press high and put Dallas on their heels. So it isn't necessarily that you took Barrios off; it's that you didn't think. I'm sure that he came into the game with the idea that I want to get Mosquera 20 minutes, and instead of letting the game dictate that, he stuck with that and didn't adjust to the fact that I needed to keep the vertical guy. And the only vertical guy he had was Brian Reynolds. So maybe you're not ready for Brian Reynolds. I think Brian Reynolds is fine in that capacity. It would have been enough. And then by taking Paxton off when he did, he took off any possession player. And so for the last 10 minutes, they had nobody that could turn and dribble out of pressure, who could relieve with some quick passing or take a ball to the corner. And so you double compounded the two things you needed to be able to kill off a game, and took them both out of the game. So that's where some of the criticism comes in with Lucci. Now, I want to say something about Baji, because he actually had 3 shots in the game, which is pretty good. All 3 of them were on goal, which is really good for Baji. But it is true that in that last moment, and by the way, he was one of only 5 mistakes on that last play. There was sort of a challenge, and he got lost out on the challenge and got whacked a little bit and went down rather than fighting through it, trying to get the play, and stayed down. And they ended up scoring with him still on the ground. So he was one of the 5 mistakes that led to the second goal. So it's not all on Baji, but that was not a good look from Baji for sure.
I'd probably call it 6 mistakes. And then when I read the breakdown, I thought that Gonzalez kind of got himself tied up. He couldn't figure out which hand he was trying to lead with, and instead his hands just stayed right in front of his chest.
Yeah, that's valid. But, between Baji and Ja'Cory Hayes not closing down, and Savania's clear, instead of clearing to the wide open Mosquera, he clears it outfield where Ferreira's under pressure, and then Ferreira's lackadaisical and doesn't challenge for the ball and win it. And then Carrillo overruns and allows the guy to turn back and shoot, and then Jesus is blocked and can't see and gets his hands wrong, as you say. And so 5, 6 mistakes, whatever. Baji was only the most visible one, though, because he laid on the ground in the last 10 minutes of the game, which is inexcusable, frankly, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, the thing is, you could see with him, he was gassed. He should have been out of the game at that point. But then he takes, I can't remember which player it was, but he leads with the shoulder and towards the chest, and Baji looks for the foul, and it's like, you didn't get it, play continued, just get the hell up.
Yeah, so, when I saw the result and read some comments and the reviews, it's pretty clear to me that this was exactly the type of game that we all agreed at the beginning of the season was highly predictable, when you've got not just a lot of young players in their teens and maybe, if lucky, if they've turned 20 yet, populating the field, and this thing that you mentioned earlier, Buzz, which is the fact that Lucci himself is equally inexperienced at his job also. And while he may end up being a great manager, he is still a rookie and very inexperienced. And what you saw last night was, I guess I'm going to let you guys tell me, was it more about poor coaching decisions or young, immature playing decisions?
It was both. I think Lucci definitely made some mistakes, and he admitted, as Dan said, in the press conference, that he was being introspective and looking at himself because he felt like he might have made some mistakes. But there was definitely a component of young players too. I mean, all 3 of Ferreira, Cirio, and Cerveno, all three contributed to the second goal. And you can even look back and sandwich the great Toronto game and the mostly great Vancouver game. You could sandwich those two things between this 10-minute meltdown and the Open Cup meltdown, which is also, to go back a week and a half, which is also a sign of a young team. So, again, it's not a roller coaster. The team's a roller coaster, but we try and be level-headed about these things. Sometimes they play great. Sometimes they play really badly. They happen to have done them in very short order in this last game and a half, and go back to the New Mexico game too. So, volatile team, young team, up and down. It's just the way it is going to be. But clearly some mistakes happen, both coaching and playing wise. And to their credit, both the coach and all the players involved afterwards talked about, okay, we got to go to the tape. We got to learn from this. We got to take this and build on it, use it in a positive way, even though we know it's a terrible moment, and try and get better. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, and we'll talk. Well, I'm trying to figure out what order I want to do this in, but since we've dwelled on the negative, let's focus and enjoy and bathe in the positive, which is the return of Paxton Pomykal, who when I went to the game on Saturday, man, I just loved so much watching him play for this team and succeed. There were several moments in the game against Toronto where he just fought through essentially what were second-degree felony assaults and just kept on going and making and completing wonderful passes, and it just brought such a smile to my face. He really fundamentally is, without question, the best player on this team, despite being 19 years old.
Yeah, I think they're up now to, I think it's 6-2-2 with Paxton playing compared to when he's gone. It's a remarkable difference, and his energy is infectious. His defensive effort out of a 10 is ridiculous. He's forechecking, as I like to call it, and creating turnovers in the offensive third. He has an explosive first step with the ball at his feet that creates space. He's got a real knack for nipping in behind guys and are not paying attention and stealing the ball. Everything about that he's doing is a joy to watch. The team struggled to break down Vancouver when they were in that low block for the whole first half, and again, young players are struggling to figure that part out. But having Paxton back, it's just night and day how much better this team is with him in the lineup.
I mean, there was a concern at the end there, that kind of horror challenge. In the locker room, he was in a boot, albeit that's precautionary just in case there is any kind of swelling or anything. There was a little bit of attention to his ankle, but I asked Lucci. He said he's fine. Amon asked Paxton himself. He said no, he's good. He's all good. It's they threw a bit of ice on the boot on just in case anything swelled up, but he's fine. He can walk on it fine.
For anybody like myself who didn't see it, what was the scenario of the tackle that caused that to happen?
It was just for a minute. They were readying Hayes to come on. I don't know who Hayes was actually originally supposed to replace. There's a good chance it could have been one of the DMs. Paxton is challenging for a 50-50 ball. He gets turned inside out by a player showing studs to the top of his foot. Kind of deal that, occasionally breaks a bone in the foot. So, if you watch the England-Cameroon game, almost the kind of thing that Steph Houghton took at the end there, that they reviewed for a possible red card.
Wow. Well, hopefully he's okay, and it's not one of those deals where he's worse than they're letting on, and he doesn't get to play in Portland. Yeah. That would be bad news. So speaking of which, the team does have a third game in 7 days. They travel away to go play in the shiny new version of Providence Park in Portland.
Still a baseball stadium.
Huh?
Still a baseball stadium.
No, it's not. It's a beautiful place. You've never been, and I'm telling you. Telling you, Dan, until you go there, you can't slag on it in any way, shape, or form. It's practically the most
turf.
Huh?
Yeah, it has turf.
Yeah, well, I would disagree with you, and I will tell you that until you go there, you have no idea that it is actually the nicest soccer stadium in the United States, bar none. And I've been to some of the nicest ones, so I will disagree with you. You can mock.
Yeah, I'll back that up. I think it's the best soccer venue in this country too, and that's given the fact that I hate turf. Thankfully, I guess they're going to go grass at some point soon, so that'll be good. But the venue itself is amazing.
All right. So, what do we think? Is there anything to talk about worth spending time on in previewing this game? I mean, I'm assuming it'll end up being the same 11, or is there some surprise that Lucci's going to have to break out, hoping to give some people some rest?
Well, I have two thoughts about that. The first is I actually think that on the road, I think Ja'Cory Hayes is likely to replace Brandon Cervania. Not that I felt Brandon Cervania played bad, but you're talking about going on the road and perhaps a more defensive mindset might be good. The other side, the other thing I think might change is with Baji, when you're sitting on the ground when the goal is scored from the other team, I think that's an offense that's worth getting sat down for. I don't know who I would say would go in that spot. Other than the obvious examples are Mosquera or Arangis. But I think, despite the fact I thought Baji played pretty well for Baji, that thing at the end is, to me, is pretty sketchy. And then the other idea I have, which might solve this problem actually, is it occurred to me that there's a couple of times this season when Lucci's gone into hostile venues where he thinks he needs to be particularly defensive, he's gone to the 3 or 5 man, as you like to say, Peter, back line. And so I think there's actually a chance, and he might need John Nelson to get healthy to do this, or he might need to use Brian Reynolds to do it, because Brisson has to be a center back. But if you're looking at a Hollingshead, Brisson, Ziegler, Hedges, and Reynolds back 5. That might be a situation that makes more sense, like he's done a couple of times. And then that also brings Baji off the field, because you'd get Hayes and Cerrillo in the middle and with Paxton in front of him, and you'd get Barrios and Ferreira up top. So I think that's a viable option, as much as it is just to say Ja'Cory Hayes, I think for sure will start. And then other than that, I think that 5 is actually a legitimate option.
So this will be the first time that Dallas gets to see Brian Fernandez in the flesh for Portland. How do you think they do anything in particular to try to account for him, other than Buzz maybe playing 3 center backs?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Portland's a good team, and they've always been a good team, despite the fact that their record's not very good. I think at this point, when you're Lucci dealing with his team and his young team, I think the emphasis is going to be on what they're doing, what Lucci's doing, what his team is doing. I think that there's not going to be, I don't think that Dallas is flexible currently enough to be fixated on what Portland is doing and trying to do some weird tactical situation, other than the potential 3 at the back. This is not the same team Pareja had, where he could do a bunch of creative, flexible, tactical stuff. So, as much as it pains me to say it, I think at this point it's about Dallas for Dallas, and let's get ourselves back on the same page, and let's recover from this meltdown and just try and play good, consistent soccer.
It's interesting because Fernandez is relatively new to the team, and Portland's so bad he's already second on the teams in goals scored with 5. But to your point, there's an interesting side story we haven't talked about yet, because really the defensive anchor for this team from the midfield has been Gruezo, who I think we can all agree now we may have already seen his last game in an FC Dallas shirt, as all of the rumors really heated up. And look who was right. He's going back to Germany.
Yeah, Peter, you were Nostradamus on that one for sure. We talked about. I actually thought he'd never come back to this season, but once he was here, it seemed like the writing's been on the wall for about a month, and you 100% called it correctly that he's going to Germany, which now terrifies me that Barrios is going to Cholos, so hopefully that's not happening. But.
Yeah, I'm really hoping I'm not right about that, but yeah. I've got a really weird feeling I am.
Lee, when they took him out of the game, Barrios, that is, you immediately saw what a big impact player he is, just as much as Paxton, frankly, and that'll be a big loss. Obviously, wing was already a concern, so now maybe there's even more emphasis why we think they're going to get another wing if Barrios really is, oh my gosh, the guy leaving. There's no signs of that, by the way. I've not seen any reports of him leaving, but it's definitely a concern that it could be him. I'm still thinking it might be Thomas Roberts, but it's Thomas Roberts, but Tommy Poo. But not that I don't love Thomas Roberts. I just all the signs point to that one for me. But we'll see. In the meantime. Edwin Cerrillo's done a pretty good job, other than the last 10 minutes of this game, of replacing him. And he's actually capable of playing a single pivot and not just a double like they've been doing in the last couple of games. But I think Lucci's probably, with 3 teenagers in there, he's probably thinking the double pivot's a better call at this point.
Yeah, I just do think potentially labeling Portland based off their league position is a little bit kind of unfair on them. Having to start with that incredibly long road trip. They're so far okay. They're only 3 games in, looking good at home. With Fernandez, they are looking like they could be, right up there with LAFC as the best in the league right now. Lucci said something in his presser actually yesterday. Someone asked about how anything affects going into Portland, and he said it's funny. No one thought we'd go into Atlanta and win, but hey, we did it. And as Buzz mentioned before, they did that by focusing on themselves, not the opposition, and just making sure that FC Dallas does what FC Dallas can do. And maybe that was a hint that that's the direction for the Portland game.
So if Gruezo does end up officially leaving, and what I can't quite figure out is, where do you think Lucci lands on his starting center 3 on this team? Is it Paxton, Acosta, and Cerrillo, or is it Cervania? And what do you think that layout turns out to look like?
Well, in the last couple of games, Cerrillo's been playing as the more 6, the more stay-at-home kind of player. And Cervania is the more sort of, he's kind of playing, Cervania's kind of playing more of a 6-8 hybrid. So Cervania and Acosta will be going head-to-head basically for that 3rd spot. There's nobody else ready to play as a pure 6 like Cerrillo can, and there's nobody else that can play Paxton's 10 spot. Even Arangi's there was just okay. So I think Acosta and the M will win that spot out. Speaking of which, I'm pretty positive, and I can't find the documentation for it, but I'm pretty positive he's actually suspended for Portland. That he got that he was on the suspension if you get the next yellow card, and he got that yellow card in the game he was leaving. But as we all know, you don't get to serve your suspension while you're on international duty. You got to serve it when you get back. So I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty positive that Acosta is suspended for this game, which means that you're going to have Hayes or Cervania in there, and I actually think it'll be Hayes. He's played pretty well before Brandon came back, and if you're going on the road, a little bit more veteran experience, a little more defensive first kind of experience, I think a little more calmness, a little more reliability in Lucci's mind. We'll probably see Hayes on there on the road.
Yeah, another name that is starting to catch some attention around the league, Bobby Warshaw actually highlighted him in his notes the other day, I noticed on the league site, is Brisson. And I'm wondering, is everybody starting to feel more comfortable with Brisson? I'm still convinced he's the new Jackson, but the red card waiting to happen. But other people seem to think he's really settling in nicely and putting in some good performances.
I think he's better at that level of control. He's sort of adapting to the league. For sure, when he's playing right back, that's 100% a defensive mentality move, and it's related to the fact that when you got 3 teenage midfielders in front of him, it's hard to put Ryan Reynolds in there, understandably. In the long run, Brisson's not going to work out there because it's clear, despite the fact he's done a better job going forward than I expected, it's still clear there's fundamentally a piece missing in terms of outside back play and the verticality Lucci looks for in his system. When Cannon comes back, it's going to be Cannon right away. There's no question. As I said before, I think there's a good chance you might go 5 with Reynolds on the wing and Brisson as a center back again. But I don't think Reynolds is ready, or I don't think Lucci is ready. I think Reynolds is ready. I don't think Lucci is ready to start Reynolds right now with this current 3-man midfield. If you had Gruezo and Acosta, it would be different, but you don't. So Reynolds is left waiting, and Brisson is doing a good job as a defensive first outside back, which is weird, but.
All right, so they play on Saturday. The game actually, I think, airs at like 10 o'clock Saturday night as the team goes to face the Timbers of Portland and all their tree stuff. They're big into the tree theme. Dan, you mentioned him, Reggie Cannon. Now, the game I did watch on Wednesday was the U.S. men's national team win over Panama, which Reggie started, and I got to tell you, I was pretty proud of the guy. For a first start, that was his first start for the national team, wasn't it?
Good question, Buzz.
Oof.
Yes,
I think so.
yes. I think. Well, it was his first start in the Gold Cup. I can't remember if it's his first.
Well, that's true for sure.
For the national. I can't remember if he had started a game before. I thought he put in a particularly fine performance. There are some things that he's doing in the attack that I thought he did very well. I thought he fought really hard. I was really proud of him and his performance. I'm still really super questionable about the state of the team overall, but it was nice to see Reggie put in a solid performance for himself. I don't know if you guys saw the game. It was not super entertaining, to be honest with you. It was a pretty much of a snoozer.
I think I didn't get to see the game, but reading a lot of the reaction from journalists and fans, a lot of people are talking up Cannon as being one of the only player to give Greg Berhalter something to think about. With the potential of moving Lima to left back. Weirdly, all the comments seem to then go on to the whole lack of a decent six for the national team, and suddenly there appears all these mentions of Paxton Pommercole's defense is so good at 10. Maybe he could be a six for the national team now.
No. Oh, no. Please, no. Don't do that to my boy. I want to see that sweet blonde hair bombing up at the attacking end of the field, not covering up the back four.
He's Superman. He can do it all.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I would agree with that. In watching the game, I thought Reggie really stood out. Look, he wasn't perfect. He made a couple of mistakes, and there are a couple of things that passes that I wish he had been a little more brave on, or some opportunities to beat his defender that he didn't do. But overall, I thought he was super solid. And, by the way, he was probably unlucky on at least two situations where a couple of his crosses just got cut out at the very, very last second. So kudos to Reggie and congratulations to him. He looks really, really good in a U.S. jersey, and I look forward to seeing more of that. The other big news was on the game on Saturday was the debut of the pro start of one Ricardo Pepi. Hello there, Mr. Dan Crook. You wrote a feature about him for MLSsoccer.com. Why don't you take this portion of the show away and tell us a little bit more about Mr. Pepi's great adventure.
Oh, God, stage fright's real. 6 minutes for Pepi in the Toronto game. They were kind of dead and buried. Still had a couple of really nice defensive actions, came back to support the team, won a couple of balls, spread his passes about well. It was... it wasn't unleashed to Pepi. It will let El Tren take his run at Toronto's defense, but baby steps. So as I mentioned, I did a feature on MLS, really just talking about how he came to the club from El Paso and from Lucci's perspective and Pepi's, and then a little bit on. It's MLS. They always want to know what's happening right now. So that kind of became the, what's the goal for him? And Lucci was up front and said, look, he's going to spend time with North Texas SC. So, he can still finish top scorer. He just needs to get that back from Damas. But he's going to make the bench for the first team, and they're going to manage it. They're going to look every couple of weeks. Is he getting significant minutes, not just sitting on the bench? Because if you're not getting significant minutes, you stagnate. Training isn't, the be-all, end-all of development, which is, certainly something that people may appreciate after the way things went with Paxton the last couple of years when he wasn't getting on the pitch.
Yeah. Well, two notes that I'll take away from what you wrote on that article. One is I think people sometimes either aren't aware or don't realize that his entire family had to pack up and move for this. For us, at the time, I guess he was 15 when this deal started, or 14 years old, and the
13.
fact, 13. Thanks. even younger. So his whole family literally packed up and moved all the way from El Paso to Dallas to pursue this dream. And I admire that so much, and I think that's such a great story to see it turn out so successfully. But the one part of the article that really grabbed me, and I'm still having a hard time digesting it and wrapping my brain around it, is Lucci's assertion that if he was to compare Pepi to any other professional striker in the world, he picked out Lewandowski. And I thought, wow, that is a really, really high bar to apply to a 16-year-old kid.
I mean, he put in the caveat of, look, he may not be as good as, but in terms of his habits, his movements with and without the ball, and the technique, and the fact that, you know, he's what, 6'3", Lewandowski's 6'1", they kind of physically got that similar stature. I know a lot of people also said, you know, Blas Perez. Maybe Blas is a little more lightweight in how he plays the game than
Blas plays too back to goal for that. Pepi like Lewandowski, is a more go at you kind of striker. He plays the high line, but he's not going to back you down like a you know, an NBA power forward would. And Dan, also, I have to bone to pick with you on this article. There's not a single mention of trains in this entire article.
Yeah, damn you, Dan.
I tried so hard to get them to run hunts, man. I was like, you know,
did they actually edit it out?
I didn't even put it in this one, to be honest.
Have they edited it? Okay, but wait.
They gave me 700 words, and I could have easily done 1,300.
Okay, but my question is, have you put the nickname Huntsman in an MLS article that you've written, and they've edited it out, or have they left it?
Several times they've edited it out.
Really?
Yeah. And the Dallas Morning News edited it out, too.
Rat bastards.
All of Degree doesn't.
Yeah, thank you, Third Degree. Yeah, by the way, Dan, Buzz is trying to sell promo hype shirts, so help a guy out, all right?
Yeah, also, buy those L Tren 9 shirts. Just, you know, maybe get a Sharpie and make it 16.
No.
Yeah.
The way this works is you write the article and say, local media is so excited, one even capitalized on it by creating a nickname and selling shirts with it on it. That's how you pull that off, dude. See, that's an interest story, human interest angle that your editor can't chop out.
Yeah, but
he'll be number 9 soon enough.
We do sports, not human interest.
Oh, okay.
I will say on the human interest, I was kind of interested in talking about sacrifices with both Pepi and Lucci. And Lucci made a point. You know, Pepi came at 13. He came ahead of his family. He had to stay with the family. Edwin Cerrillo, same deal. He came on his own. He had to leave his family in Waco. His family is still in Waco.
Well, I didn't know that. As far as I'm aware. Wow, I didn't know that.
I think that anyway. But they have something. They have a couple of guest families. They have a house or two where they can stash kids that have a married couple who act as residency supervisors, and then for the older kids who are like with the 19s or North Texas SC, they also have a couple of apartments as well that the players can live at.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. Is I just learned that this week. Is that they have 2 houses that some of the younger kids live in, and they have apartments that the older kids live in. Dan stole my bit.
No,
it's rare that I talk this much.
No. I suddenly was having this flash idea that's, you know, what if one day we get this breaking story that the Frisco police raided the FC Dallas White House, which is like the old Dallas Cowboys circa 1993 Michael Irving, Emmett Smith party joint. Yeah, that would be awesome if the FC Dallas had something like that. I'll tell you guys a quick story about Pepi. So I have a friend who is part of the youth academy setup. He's been a part of that for a very long time. He knows this game about better than anybody I know, and I don't talk to him very often, but when I do, I kind of pick his brain and say, hey, what about this kid and what about that kid? And he's always absolutely spot on about how they turn out in retrospect years later. And he gave such a glowing, promising preview of Ricardo Pepi. It really made me excited. I said to him, hey, is this Pepi kid legit? And he just was quiet for about 2 seconds and said, he's completely legit. And if he says that, I believe it, and so I expect good things from Ricardo Pepi going forward. That's pretty exciting. Now,
man, you didn't believe he was legit when I told you he was legit?
I did believe. I totally.
That's because you were getting the agent fee.
Yeah, it's true.
I did, Buzz, but you're also trying to sell L Train hype shirts, so I wondered you had a underhanded.
That happened afterwards.
Yeah, well, or did it? Or did it, Buzz?
No, come on.
Okay, so then the thing I think I'll ask you guys to comment on, just because it tickles my funny bone to no end, is North Texas also played a game this week, and lo and behold, look who made his return and did not fail to disappoint. One Christian Coleman.
Yeah, he was exactly what Christian Coleman always is, which was good positioning, good runs, good game reading, got himself in the right spots, and then fired the chances over the top. Now, it's good to see him recovering. He's a great guy. He's been working his tail off. He actually looked much better than I thought he was going to. He went a full 60 minutes. I was really surprised with that. He's going to get some chances over the next couple of games to try and build towards like a 90-minute fitness pace. He's easily got another month worth of work before he'll make a bench for an MLS game. But Pepi's already making MLS benches ahead of the Garden Snake, and now Coleman in another month's going to be making the benches ahead of him too. So it might get real crowded on that FC Dallas striker bench coming up pretty soon. So Pepi's going to probably have to come down and play more minutes with North Texas, which is fine.
That's cool.
But the Garden Snake's going to be out in the cold here pretty much exclusively once Coleman is healthy.
Dan, what were you mumbling in the background?
That's called progress.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Garden Snake's progress.
Yeah, somebody posted the GIF of Coleman really making a nice move, chesting a ball down, setting himself up, and then absolutely moonshotting over the bar. And I thought, that's my boy.
That was a harder chance than people get even credit for. I mean, that was on his left foot.
Dan, you're absolutely 100% correct, but you have to admit that giving him a little bit of stick about that is totally a byproduct of every other really easy opportunity we've seen him fart away over the last 2 years.
It's just like Baji. His reputation is his own doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my question is one thing Christian always had is that I always thought he was way faster than you'd expect. Does he look like he's lost a step at all in terms of speed?
Well, he looks like a guy who's just coming back from a year out with a knee injury. I mean, he wasn't noticeably slow. He already looks quicker than Snake to me, So he's not, of course, 100% where he was, but I think it's just he doesn't look like he's lost any explosiveness. It merely looks to me like it's a guy who's not 100% yet. It's like there's a difference between. This is maybe hard to grasp it if you're not around pro players or not. A lot. There's a difference between being 100% fit and being 100% game fit, of course, and having like 100% mental subconscious mental recovery. We saw it most recently with earlier in the what God was that last year when Kellen Acosta was coming back, and it was like he was back in training, and I was like, sure, he's healthy. Sure, he's quote unquote 100%. He was not. It's like he was playing at about 80%. And that's what it looked like when you watched Coleman. He looked like he was playing at about 80, 85%. And as he gets his fitness back over the next month and builds that base back up, it'll come back. And I think he'll be exactly the player he was before. And then we'll just go back to what we were doing before he got hurt, which was hoping that eventually his quality soccer understanding and play will result in actual goals. Probably not, but we can hope.
Yeah, I guess we can hope. We can always hope.
Yeah.
All right. So the Portland on Saturday. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Anything else we're missing from the FC Dallas standpoint?
Oh, sure. One other thing I wanted to talk about, Peter, was I learned this week, like in addition to seeing Coleman's return, we also saw North Texas play a game where they had to use Michelle, the coach Michelle, as a player, and which was fascinating to watch because all the 19s are at the developmental academy playoffs, and or guys like Pepi are with the first team, so they were short bodies, and they actually used 2 academy players on the bench that aren't really academy players; they're actually premier players, and they brought them along, so that was fun.
How did Michelle do?
Like a 33-year-old coach.
Okay.
But you know what? They got steamrolled that game, but it wasn't all on him. But it was a bad performance on the road, and it was a bad situation. And Quill talked a little bit afterwards about, this is the first time they've gone with this experience, and they need to plan a little bit better for the confluence of the DA Academy games and a heavy load and not having the MLS guys come down because they were on the road. So they didn't have Montgomery and they didn't have. They took Thomas Roberts, and then in the second game they played Thomas Roberts as a 6 in midfield, which was crazy to watch. Which he did a pretty decent job of. His long passing from there was amazing to watch. That was really creative. But specifically, it made me wonder, why don't you just sign a guy for like a game? Stick him in there. Go get somebody from Riados, whatever. Well, the answer is, if you're going to sign somebody to a contract, it has to be a contract through November. So you have to basically give them some guaranteed money for the end of the year. So essentially, you can't sign a guy for just a game. Is basically the answer. So if you're wondering why they didn't, you can't. So instead, they used one of their coaches, and
is so sketchy.
Yeah. So in the UK, we have this thing in non-league called a Corinthian contract, where you pay a token amount, which is like £1 as their guaranteed money, and then you give them an appearance fee. Could you not get around it with something like that?
Apparently not. Apparently, anyone you're going to sign, and I suppose with Michel, they must have gotten around it by using some sort of rule that he's already on the payroll and we're just activating him. Which is really weird. They could have used any MLS player that they just sent down, but they just didn't. And they didn't have any of their academy guys. They brought in some guys that are from the youth club, to try and fill up the bench a little bit, and those guys got in, which must have been a thrill for them, but. It's just a weird situation, and I think they'll try and work diligently to have one or two more bodies, as they go forward, and it won't be a much of a problem next year because they're going to sign, 4 or 5 academy guys this summer or winter, I think. Anyway, so
they had 9 academy players in the squad.
Essentially they're using their U19 team, for lack of a better term. Plus, I got a couple guys that graduated last year, so it's like it's not, that's what it has become basically. So it's just going to become a further extension of that. I just thought it was mostly interesting that you can't just bring in a guy. I mean, MLS used to have extra keepers, Peter. I don't know if you remember this. They used to have 2 keepers
that
are signed to emergency contracts that you can just use you borrow them for like a week from the league. It's just really crazy.
Yeah.
How crazy was it when Kevin Hartman was in that pool?
Was he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he was for a very short, brief period of time. It was very unstable. There was just 2 guys floating around the country on an emergency last notice that you could have a goalkeeper, so you didn't have to keep like a third one on your roster or a fourth or something. I can't remember what it was. It was extreme. It was one of the very early MLS unstable features that people used to make fun of.
Well, they even have guys that they've kept in camp, that I thought, well, that's a perfect guy. They've had him returning all year. Just throw him in there, sign him for one game. But so you can't. And if you wanted to know specifically, like one of those guys is Mohamed Cisse, who we all thought was interesting in the preseason. Apparently, there's some visa issues with him in terms of trying to roster him, or else they would have by now. So there you go.
Oh, and the most delicious rumor I heard today on the interweb was that Emerson Hyndman is in discussions to sign with Atlanta, which I find interesting because the article that's on MLS Soccer doesn't mention anything about a transfer fee. He's under contract at Bournemouth until I think June of next year. So there's got to be some sort of financial consideration, unless Bournemouth just hates him so much they're going to let him out of his deal. But Buzz, you were the one that seemed to pick up on the note that FC Dallas still has his rights.
Yeah, well, like anybody else that comes out of your academy, and Emerson Hyndman came out of their academy, you for a certain amount of time you have rights to a player, and as long as you keep sort of, there's some maintenance that you can do on rights. I don't know the exact details of Emerson Hyndman's situation. I did, however, wonder about it, so I asked somebody who would know, and their answer is yes. FC Dallas still has his MLS rights. So if anybody in the league wants to sign him, you'll have to trade with FC Dallas, just like LAFC did when they wanted Shaft Brewer and all these other things. So, Dallas is in the catbird seat in a certain level where Emerson Hyndman's a pretty nice player. Someone's going to want him. They're going to have to pay more than $5 to get him, I would think. So that'll be interesting to watch that progress and see how that goes forward.
Okay, so now I want to play out this scenario for everybody. First off, the look on Shellis Hyman's face when he realized the fact that the future of his kid coming back home is still somehow tied to Dan and Clark Hunt. That's so delicious. And I also want to play out this other scenario. Left winger, his brother owns his old home in Frisco, and it would probably drive Shellis Hyman nuts. Would they make a move to get Brek back in Dallas? Discuss amongst yourselves.
Wow. It would be a lot of fun. I tell you that. That'd be a good story. I would say I'm going to bet no that they'll go for money and or picks.
Oh God, I
but,
hope so.
It certainly would be. I mean, that's the obvious answer is money and or picks. Gubber bucks, whatever you want to call them. But it would be a whole lot of fun if it were Brek Shea. I mean, that would just be delicious in terms of the story and going out there and talking to him and see how he's doing and just getting him back in a Dallas uniform would be a gaggle of hoots.
Buzz, have you seen?
Oh, it would be so much fun.
Have you seen Brek Shea play soccer in the last few years?
No, I'm not talking about on field. Who cares about that? I'm talking about the story, the fun of it. I'm not suggesting they actually do
the gunplay.
I'm just suggesting that it will be fun if they do.
The crazy art, the cornrows, the genie pants,
the pig's head on the locker.
That's right. All of it. Awesome. All right, Buzz, I got a question for you. Who will be playing Dan's English Lionesses in the semifinal? Will it be France or your United States of America?
Before the tournament, I would have said France, but I'm going to give the USA some credit. I think they've played really well, and they look like their plan of dominant offense and sketchy defense actually is working. So I think I think the USA will advance over France. Any
prediction on or hope on your part? Who if you had to pick one or the other, which one would you rather play, Dan?
Be the best. You got to beat the best, right? So that's the US.
Right. Well, but is there a position to think that you'd rather not play the home team, considering how much advantage that tends to give in a World Cup?
I'd be more concerned about France's defense. I mean, England, you arguably have one of the top 5 centre-backs in the world. You have the best right-back in the world. You have a keeper who's playing at the top of a game right now, which, may shut Megan Rapinoe out. France seems to be a little more, more as a unit, I guess.
I have no idea what you just said, Dan.
It'll be interesting to see if the U.S. versus France makes some changes in their front line, because you could argue that Rapinoe and Morgan had potentially their worst games of the tournament in the last round.
I think Rapinoe's been bad I think Rapinoe has been disappointing the last 2 games, maybe the last 3 games. She had a fairly good first game, but everybody did against Thailand. I don't think she has been consistent or I believe I tend to go with everybody that thinks that Jill Ellis is going to go with her tried and true tomorrow afternoon. And that's going to disappoint a lot of people. The big thing, I think, the question is, who does she take off the field when she puts Lindsey Horan back on? And I know what's going to happen. She's going to keep Julie Ertz on the field, and she's going to take Rose Lavelle off, and that's going to drive a lot of people nuts. That was weird in the last game too. But
when that happened, when she took Lavelle off.
Well, I think Lavelle had started to disappear a little bit in the game, and I think she was really trying to solidify defensively, try to get a little bit more midfield control. I do believe Lindsey Horan is going to help fix a lot of the problems we saw in the Spain game. She's the best player on the team, no question about it. But is 80% of Alex Morgan as good as 100% of Kristen Press? And I think that's a debate you could make all day and night.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that regard. I just think, as I agree with you that Roland Lamar on the left wing, Rapinoe on the left wing hasn't had a good couple of games. So would she dare to take her off? I'd hate to see Rose go off. She's been one of the U.S.'s most creative players for me. I think she's a big part of what they're good at. And taking her off is going to make you a little more one-dimensional in midfield. I'm not sure that's the way to go.
So, Dan, are you predicting? Well, first off, Buzz, what's your score prediction?
I'm going to go 2-1 to the United States.
In regulation?
Yeah, regulation.
All right, Dan, what's your
I was
score
going to go
prediction?
for 2-1 in regulation as well, with at least 2 really controversial VAR incidents.
Oh, my God. Boy, they really have they've really set VAR back. And I do think a lot of it is the new IFAB, the introduction of the new rules that IFAB instituted earlier this year. I think, man, the way they've instituted VAR in this tournament has been really, really disappointing and frustrating for a lot of people. I have already publicly predicted this, so I'll stick with it. I think the game ends 2-2. They go to extra time, and I think the boss, Carly Lloyd, scores a very Carly Lloyd type goal to win the game in extra time and make it 3-2. That's what I think happens.
That'd be exciting.
That would be so American.
Am I the only one that feels like that as the MLS season has gone on, that the delays and restarts are getting longer and longer and longer because of the VAR, because the refs standing and listening to the VAR and not restarting play? I thought last game was particularly bad for the.
Well, the last game, the first goal, everyone was convinced that Barrios was offside. Let's be honest. Was just waiting for that.
Was he offside? Was he offside? I never have seen a definitive angle to tell me if he was or not.
But the sideline camera certainly made it look like he was a good couple of yards off. Weirdly, there was a poor question to the referee, and he said the VAR the video assistant referee did not see any offside infringement on Ferreira, because a lot of people mistakenly thought Ferreira was offside or Barrios. I think
fascinating.
I mean, there wasn't a telling angle, because there's only a couple of cameras at the stadium. They're focused on the halfway line, that sideline camera. So it may have just been, was it a clear and obvious error that we can see for sure? No.
Yeah.
I don't even mean like necessarily on goals. I mean, even like on free kicks, or goal kicks. He's like the ref stand there holding up play while he's listening to VAR, and it's like it's like the game. Several people commented to me about it. I thought it was particularly bad in this last game. It seems to be getting worse.
Yeah, maybe the VAR officials are getting more brave and voicing their opinion more and longer. I don't know. It's an odd introduction, and as I wrote 2 years ago, it is the new normal, and it certainly is that.
I like VAR. The implementation is just. MLS and especially this Women's World Cup are just insane.
Well, VAR is a concept, and I keep saying this, and I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but it's a very binary digital tool for a sport which rules are, by and large, very analog, and the way people historically interpret those laws is very analog, and now suddenly we're worried about goalkeepers stepping off the line. Well, people have a point. If she's off the line, she's off the line. And the fact that it's 2 centimeters or 2 feet really doesn't make a difference. You're either off the line or you're not. But that really changes the spirit and historically for 100 years how this game has been played in terms of interpreting the rule. And VAR ruins that. So you think of the Rose Lavelle incident. What maddens me about that is the referee is in a perfect spot to see that foul occur. What she has the advantage of that you don't get in VAR is that she can hear the contact being made between the defender and Rose Lavelle's shin guard. I suspect she can hear it, and she makes a very clear and definitive and immediate call for a penalty kick, and everybody's freaking out because now you've looking and dissecting and, as I say, zaprudering the film, for a good 3 minutes, trying to watch it frame by frame and frame, and that just, I don't know. That's the part of VAR that I really, really don't like at all, and it just drives me nuts.
I don't like is the communication of it as much as anything. We've gone over, the communication to the media and people on TV and in the stadium.
Yeah.
And those all lack so much. But even, what VAR should do. Take the penalty incident for the US. I mean, it was slight contact. It was a foul. And the first thing you're looking at is how much of a foul was it? Then that's not the emphasis. The emphasis is, did the referee make a mistake, yes or no?
Yeah. But then, if you think about it, either a few minutes before or later, they have clear video evidence of Mega Rumpido. There's literally a player's arm around her neck, almost like in a chokehold on a corner kick.
I saw that picture.
And well, it was a full video of it, and it's like, if that's not a reviewable penalty kick situation, I don't know what is, and I nobody can ever explain to me why they don't go back and call those penalty kicks. I mean, that. In fact, I would argue that's a worse foul than the one they called for Rose Lavelle that gave them the second penalty kick. So those are all the things that I think drive the general fan base mad, is that they still haven't figured out how to communicate how they're making these decisions, which, by the way, I am the president of, make the audio live and available to everybody to hear what that communication is. And two, they just don't seem to implement it consistently, and I think that's what drives everybody nuts.
They say it's the consistency. The penalty the US got, it was a penalty. It was, it wasn't the harshest of challenge, but it was a foul. You got the England game where you had a player's foot stamped on in the box, no penalty given. A player spat on, a player elbowed, and then another player stamped on, and all of those decisions came back from VAR, no foul, no nothing. Yeah,
I don't know, dude. I think that's where we have this concept of a technology to help solve and spot things that the referee isn't at an advantage to do because there's only one referee on the field, and it doesn't get used, and I find that to be a big flaw. It'll be fascinating in EPL next year when the VAR official is the final arbiter of what will be decided in VAR situations, not the center referee, which fundamentally changes one of the basic tenets of this game, which is the center referee is the final arbiter. In the EPL next year, that will not be the case.
I don't like that implementation either. I like the MLS, the referee still makes the decision.
Well, here I'll tell you the argument that was made to me as to why they've decided to do this is because they believe it will crack down on player dissent, because the referee will be able to look at the players and go, "Don't yell at me. I didn't make the decision. Somebody up in the box made the decision." And I do think there's an element of goal line technology mentality behind that, which is, well, I can't yell at him. He didn't make the decision. Somebody else did.
They still yell
I can't argue with the computer kind of thing.
It's goal line technology.
And not like they used to, dude. That has died off so fast in comparison to the old days.
Players surround the ref, yellow card comes out. That's it. That solves it. The year that they actually made that a rule, it solved it, and then they took it back.
I don't know. Well, we could.
I missed that rule.
I have a feeling we're going to do nothing but talk about VAR endlessly, and it's just
welcome to the VARcast.
It's here to stay. Yeah, the VARcast. We should register that right away. Somebody get on that. Get us a URL and
John Lennon's already bought it, probably.
Yeah.
Good for him. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Buzz. Good stuff today, and hopefully better things for FC Dallas on Saturday. Thank you, curious FC Dallas fan. We will speak to you next time on yet another ye old edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Buy a t-shirt from the Third Degree store now.